Welcome to a special episode of Firebreathing Kittens. This is our rules discussion where we discuss the rules we played in the past dozen games for March 2025. I'll be reading people's feedbacks from the tabletop role-playing games, Dicing with Death, Alien, the official role-playing game, Action 12 Cinema, Here at the End, Pirate Borg, Pocket Gumshoe, Cyborg, and Mork Borg. Let's dive right in, reading these reviews written by our Firebreathing Kittens players and game masters. The episode When a Tree Falls featured the RPG system Dicing with Death. Our first review says, I like Dicing with Death. I think it's easy to use. I had a hard time figuring out where to put rolls, like where to tell players to roll for something, compared to Dungeons & Dragons. Our second review says, Dicing with Death is good, but sometimes it feels awkward when you have to describe the beats that you're using, and it can be a bit repetitive to use the feats that you have. We had 5 feats at max power level, but it was still repetitive to use them over and over. I wish there was more opportunity to roll the dice to mess with our fate. In this game, we failed once or twice, not too often. We were more powerful and got a bunch of dice, but it's nice to have more complications in a game. Our third reviewer says, I'm a weird person who likes both super heavy roleplay, but also super math-intensive rolling combat. So I kind of wish there was more rolling, but I love the roleplay aspect. I love how the system tends to lend itself to being very creative. In both Dicing with Death games I've been in, I show up dead. So I don't know if that's a prerequisite for the game, but within that context, it's still a lot of fun. The episode Agent B featured the RPG system Alien, the official role-playing game. The first reviewer said, I enjoyed my dip into the world of Alien RPG. Though only broadly familiar with the Alien franchise, it was easy to see how the system is designed to foster the themes of awe, uncertainty, and horror in the sci-fi setting. Relatively easy to wrap your head around the mechanics. This is a great system for folks who love to chuck a lot of dice. That said, because the system is so dice-heavy, it can create some weird dynamics when used at a time where the rolling is infrequent, though the game system encourages GMs to not expect players to be rolling frequently, and to save dice for dramatic moments. In our own playthrough, it led to a creature functionally equivalent to a soldier xenomorph, potentially coming across as underwhelming in dangerousness because of the challenge I had that evening rolling 6s on dice pools of 10 plus dice. For a game where player characters were max leveled, they were packing sufficient heat to quickly take out the antagonist before we engaged much with the critical injury tables. I would definitely be up for running or playing another game of Alien the RPG, and would have particular interest in experiencing more low-level play, where there would be a greater emphasis on PCs feeling limited in the gear for the engagement. I suspect this would heighten the survival theme of the gameplay, as would a narrative grounded in a setting where PCs also have to deal with the mechanics around stewarding limited fuel, ammo, and even oxygen. If you like sci-fi survival and horror, get out there and try the Alien RPG. Our second reviewer said, the Alien RPG is a fantastic combination of both a 400-page rulebook and really easy mechanics that even a person who has never played a tabletop role-playing game before can quickly learn. It's a very well-designed product that does a perfect job of adding value to the beloved Alien movie franchise because it feels like it has heft to it, with dozens of beautiful, terrifying art pieces and a real weight to the physical rulebook. At the same time, the designers appreciated and understood that their audience might be people who were fans of the movies, but had never played a role-playing game before. So the rules are simple and easy to learn. There are no roll modifiers, and you, the player, are never asked to do math. You never need to add numbers together. How it works is you have 4 base stats: strength, wits, empathy, and agility. Each stat has 3 skills, which for 4 stats means 12 skills total. When your character tries to do something, they roll for a skill. You roll as many 6-sided dice, or d6, as your number in the stat, plus your number in the skill. For example, if you wanted to convince a non-player character to do what you wanted, you would roll your empathy stat number of dice of 4 and your manipulation skill number of dice of 3, so you would roll 7 dice total. If you get even 1 6 on a dice, then your attempt to manipulate them succeeds. Additional 6s let you do stunts, which is a list of additional things you can choose to do for each skill. If you didn't get the number of 6s you were looking for, or failed to get a 6 at all, you can choose to push the dice, which means adding a stress and getting to re-roll the non-6s. Stress is something your character accumulates, which wears off 1 point for every 10 minutes when you're not around an enemy. For every stress, you get to roll an extra dice, but if you roll a 1 on any stress dice, your character panics and consults the panic table to see what happens. Roll a d6 and add your stress level to it, and see what the result is on the panic table. And that's it. That's the rules. They're quick to learn, straightforward, and make a lot of sense. They also really capture the feel of the Alien movies, where sometimes the characters were too overwhelmed with stress to act ideally, and were left panicking instead of reacting like they should have. The Alien RPG is a wonderfully designed system that is both a credit to the franchise with tons of art, example scenarios, and character build options for people experienced with role-playing games, and a great first RPG for fans of the movie who had never played one before. The only caveat is that with 2 hit points, my character would have died as soon as an enemy even just gently tapped me, but that's part of the fun when playing a horror-themed game where you are fragile and the world is scary. I had a lot of fun playing the Alien RPG. The episode 'Tis the Seasons featured the RPG system Action 12 Cinema. Our first reviewer says, Action 12 Cinema is a really good storytelling device. The downside is, as a player, it's a bit anticlimactic. I like when there's a GM crafting a story for us. It feels like a gift, like an act of service. With this, I didn't really get that. I knew everything that was going to happen. Also, the enemy can't really fight back. She just stood there. Our second reviewer said, Action 12 Cinema was fun, but the mechanics are a little weird, especially when you get non-player characters added to the scene. I think we solved it well on the fly. It was also anticlimactic, knowing everything that was going to happen. Planning the game beforehand where we all knew the next step made the session shorter, as we all knew where we were going next before we started playing. Our third review says, The system removes the role of Game Master and asks everyone to equally write the plot of the game. But that wasn't really enough guidance, and it would help to have specific tasks assigned to specific people so everyone knows which part they're responsible for. Also, you're intended to print the character sheet to keep track of the stressed and broken boxes next to each skill, but there's too much black ink used on the character sheet to comfortably print it without spending a lot of money on ink. A printable version would be a good addition. Our fourth review says, We ended up always banking and never exploding 12s that we rolled because banking them increases the range of numbers that are a success, but exploding them right away doesn't. If the game designer means for us to explode the dice that same turn instead of banking them, they could expand the success range for exploding d12s too. It felt a bit odd that there wasn't a way for the villain to attack us. The only way for us to get injured was to roll a 1, which happens only 1 out of 12 times on a d12, and even less often than that because there was a mechanic for re-rolling 1s. We felt a bit too invincible. Maybe Action 12 Cinema would have more stakes to it if instead of being able to be both stressed and broken, the stat or skill or relationship went right to broken. There are so many other stats and skills and relationships to roll that having one of them broken wasn't too bad. If breaking stats happened more often, it would encourage the flexibility in our storytelling as we try to use our remaining skills. And then the frequent healing would have had more to do. We were often triggering healing when we were already fully healed. The episode Of All Things featured the RPG system here at the end. Our first reviewer said, I feel like with these kinds of scene-telling games, like here at the end, it's a little bit like the Tales of Baron Munchausen. The thing with these kinds of storytelling games is that they're great for going around and telling stories. But one of the things I like about role-playing games is we're interacting with each other, not just telling stories in the same space. We're playing off each other a lot more. I think we did that here in defiance of the written rules of here at the end. So that interaction is something that if I were looking for a game that was like this or a little different or extended rules, that I would encourage that interplay to make the storytelling more improv with each other rather than I am going to tell a story. Our second review says, we just kind of naturally added in the extra character interactions to tide things over and let some of the stories flow a bit better, but that might just be because we're doing it for entertainment's sake. Just playing it straight would probably be absolutely fine if you had a long train ride and you had a tarot deck and wanted to tell some stories. We modified the system to work a bit better in the entertainment setting. As a storytelling tool, I think here at the end works quite nicely because the themes of each of the Arcana cards does give a broad but specific prompt. It works quite nicely for general improv games with yes and at the beginning. Like if you pull out the Fool, you know the preset theme of the story everyone wants to tell instead of going off what the person immediately before you said. Here at the end is a good game if you've got some time to kill. In the context of the podcast, it only works right at the end as the slower drop in action as an epilogue after a big season finale. So that's why we played it as the last thing in the season. I liked how simple and easy to learn it was. The episode Salty Sea Shanties featured the RPG system Pirate Borg. Their first reviewer says, the rulebook's color and layout were gorgeous. I liked that there was a mechanical reward for learning real pirate sea shanties. Review 2 says, Pirate Borg seemed very simple. Very fun mechanics. We didn't touch the magic part, but that would have been fun to explore. Our third reviewer says, in the ship-to-ship combat, I think we did actually roll attacks against ourselves rather than roll defense, because I don't think the ship-to-ship is as neatly integrated in that philosophy, or it's possible we played it wrong. With a static DR of 12, or mostly a 12, you need to have at least a +2 on your stat in order to succeed about half the time. Half the time is considered a fairly standard goal for your success rate for a fun game. Which is not to say harder games can't be fun, but it's obviously harder if it's higher. As a game designer, I think about that. If it's harder to succeed than 50%, then it's important to me that players understand that this is a challenging game. It's not necessarily bad, it's just a good thing to explain to players. For me, I rolled poorly on my stats. I had a -2 on strength, and a -1 on agility to start out. I was not great at either of those, so I knew that when we got into the fight, I needed to be doing things that were not actually fighting, like boarding the other ship and trying to do repairs and talking to sirens and things like that. The math of the dice combined with the fact that I had to roll for stats meant that I was making choices based on that. That's fine. I think that's the design direction of this game. I like how it turned out, I just wouldn't want to play Pirate Borg long term, but I feel that way about a lot of this style of game. Our reviewer 4 said, I like that I could follow the mechanics of Pirate Borg. It was pretty straightforward. The fact that only the players roll dice removes a potential layer of complications. It didn't come up, but I like how there are built-in mechanics for dying but still being in the game, because one of my least favorite things is potentially losing a character forever. I get so attached to my characters. I like how helpful the instructions are. The little guide card thing that's not a character sheet itself, where it walks you through step by step, is so helpful. The episode Fugue Tracing featured the RPG system Pocket Gumshoe. Our first reviewer said, "I don't love that we have to spend our points, that it's not an aptitude but a bank, and that we can run out. At the end, I had no more magic to spend. It seems like that kind of thing would happen a lot." Our second reviewer said, "It makes it hard to have a big dramatic end scene when you have spent and run out of all of your points. The way that Pocket Gumshoe expends your specialization points makes all the characters the same by the final scene. We no longer are our unique character builds. We're all just out of points and tussling, wrestling in the dirt. Especially since, as a mystery game, mysteries are designed to have a big detective reveal at the end. The lack of mechanics for a reveal scene could be an area that a future version might add something for. Like how at the end of Murder on the Orient Express, Poirot's deduction reveal made the whole story much more impressive, pulled threads together to tell a cohesive tale, and made the whole experience a worthwhile piece of entertainment. The reveal scene is important for famous historic detective works." Review 3 said, "I have a lot of thoughts on Pocket Gumshoe versus the other Gumshoe systems, which are more flexible on what you can spend your points on. As a GM, the hardest part of Pocket Gumshoe is that you have to pre-plan the story, and I am a much better improv GM as a general rule, so this is my hardest part with it." The episode Granny's Glasses featured the RPG system Cyborg. The first reviewer said, "The rules were easy to follow. The rulebook was a lot to go through, but the playthrough really helped. Once you understand the rules and start getting into it, I think it's a pretty good game. I think it's fun. I liked the drugs. The drugs are fun. The glitches were pretty fun too. That was very helpful to help with certain aspects of the game. The glitches and the drugs were my favorite. The only complaint that I have is the HP. If they want you to get more into the combat, if you're starting out at a small level, the HP is less fair. If I had to complain about anything, the hit points are too low." Our second review says, "I like the Cyborg rules. It is pretty similar to Pirate Borg. I felt like I had a little bit harder time following it compared to Pirate Borg. It's definitely the same kind of system, but it's harder to follow the rules of this one, or at least to keep track of them. My favorite part of the rules is I like the infestations. I like that the nano powers come with an infestation. It's a cool way to roleplay, or just have some ongoing negative status that you just have to deal with when it happens. It can make things go in a different direction." The episode Tale of Two Castles featured the RPG system Mork Borg. Our first reviewer says, "I first heard about Mork Borg a few years ago when someone asked, 'What is the most beautiful rulebook you've ever seen?' Someone answered, 'Mork Borg.' So I was excited to get to read this rulebook, and the rulebook of its related games, Cyborg and Pirate Borg. I opened the 2-page art spreads and was not disappointed. They've got a very strong style. Aggressively styled, in your face, pushing their tone and feel. I really liked them. A doom metal album of a game. A spiked flail to the face. Light on rules, heavy everything else." Pirate Borg, which is Undead Caribbean themed, has some of the most beautiful 2-page art spreads I've ever seen in any rulebook. Instead of just reading the pages and hunting and pecking what rules I needed to learn how to play, I found myself flipping back to the art spreads and just admiring them. It's clear that a lot of love went into the presentation of these rules. And the rules themselves are pretty easy to understand, which helped for getting people to play with me. It's nice when I can summarize how to roll dice for combat in a few sentences. It makes it easier to get people to play with in the game. So, overall, what was my impression of Mork Borg? Fantastic rulebook art. Solid rules. Inspiring lore and monsters that captured one's imagination. detailed tables of GM story prompts that made it easy to plan an adventure, and overall, a very good time. I really enjoyed Mork Borg. Review 2 says, the rules are fairly simple to understand. The PDF could really use a table of contents. The mechanics were fun for a horror sense. Reviewer 3 says, I agree that the rules were pretty simple. However, I'm kind of like still the whole hit points system is still kind of seeming like it's not, like the game wants us to die and not experience the game, if that makes sense. Our next reviewer said, the most standout thing about Mork Borg that it does excellently is generating a particular vibe or feeling. From the items, to the character abilities, to the creatures you're fighting, this system is steeped in the lore and setting. I do think that I remember reading that there's a web resource where people can access the rules in black and white, easy-to-read font. I don't think that's emphasized in the rulebook anywhere. It was a good call by the creators to include that for folks, and I appreciate their decision to do that. Mork Borg does what it aspires to, in terms of creating a particular vibe and being a rules-light system. So long as people go into it with eyes open, they're going to have a great game. And that is all of the feedback that our players and game masters have had for the games that we've played recently. The list of games that we played was Dicing with Death, Alien the Official RPG, Action 12 Cinema, Here, at the End, Pirate Borg, Pocket Gumshoe, Cyborg, and Mork Borg. What was your favorite game? Leave us a comment. Go check out the episode that featured that system if it's something you want to play. The upcoming games to get excited about are Dungeon Caster, Vaesen, Rises Epic, Travel-Sized RPG, Roll for Shoes, DC-20, Ikrala, and Spellrunners. I hope you join us for those episodes, and we'll catch you in the future. Bye-bye!